Hello chaps and chapettes, and welcome to a movie review. Yes, a movie review. I do them occasionally, and today I'm going to be focusing on the 1990 film The Memphis Belle. A movie based off the offensive bombing campaign of the Allied forces and focuses upon the most iconic American heavy bomber, the B-17. The film was written and directed by two relatively new talents, written by Monty Merrick and directed by Michael Clayton Jones, both only having one credit prior to their name before filming. Now, as stated, this film is based off a prior film, a documentary to be precise, by William Wyler, the only director to have won an Academy Award for Best Picture 3 times, as of 2019. Of course, that may change in future. Memphis Belle, A Story of a Flying Fortress, is a fantastic film which actually appears a little in the 1990 namesake. Much of the movie was shot in 1943 aboard a plane in actual combat missions, and is well worth a watch. The film is and was considered to be so important that it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in America. Now onto the film at hand. If this video is popular enough, maybe I will look at the original a little bit more depth. So make sure to like and comment if you would like to actually see me go into that original documentary a bit in the future. As the film begins, we are greeted by a written introduction. In the summer of 1943, a fierce battle raged in the skies over Europe. Every day, hundreds of young airmen faced death as they flew bombing raids deep into enemy territory. Fewer and fewer were coming back. A statement many were thinking about with the daylight bombing raids carried out by the American heavy bomber squadrons, and one of the reasons the Memphis Belle was so important for morale and, more importantly, war bonds, to help pay for more and more vehicles and get more and more men to sign up to fight the fascist oppression in Europe. John Lithgow, Lieutenant Bruce Derringer, then handily goes into detail about the crew of the Memphis Belle and their general character traits.
Okay, let's see who we got here.
That being Captain Dennis Dearborn, played by Matthew Modine, Sergeant Danny Daly, played by Eric Stoltz, First Lieutenant Luke Sinclair, by Tate Donovan, Lieutenant Phil Lowenthal, played by D.B. Sweeney, Lieutenant Valentine Kozlowski, played by Billy Zane, Sergeant Richard Rascal Moore, played by Sean, seems to be in every single movie, Astin, Sergeant Clay Busby, played by Harry Connick Jr., Sergeant Virgil Hoogstiger, Reed Diamond, Sergeant Eugene McVeigh, Courtney Gaines, and finally Sergeant Jack Bockey, played by Neil Guintoli. This covers the 10 crew members of the Memphis Belle. Of course, these aren't actually the crew members who served on the Memphis Belle in reality, and are made up for this film, the names at least. You see, this movie is actually a sort of homunculus of different stories and tales from the Second World War and combat operations over European skies with the bombing crews. So it's kind of fictional, but it's kind of true. It's one of those weird little in-between films. It's based off a true story. We see our first B-17s coming home from an air raid, and this gives us the exposition for the movie. Derringer is here to publish the heroic fact that the Belle is flying her 25th combat mission tomorrow and writing a piece on it to help raise the morale of the American public at home. He talks to concerned Colonel Craig Harriman, played by David Strathairn.
So that's the crew of the Memphis Belle, huh?
Those are the enlisted men. You're meeting the officers this afternoon.
They must be the 10 luckiest sons of bitches in the world.
They're just ordinary men, Colonel.
Are you kidding? Ordinary. First they volunteer for all this, and then they fly 24 missions without a scratch. That doesn't sound very ordinary to me.
But the Colonel is distracted a little while waiting for the last few planes to come home. It appears all planes have made it home from the last raid, but an engine starts to misfire, and the plane is missing its left landing gear. It skids across the runway and appears the B-17, Paddle and Madeline, has made it, only to erupt it into a fireball once coming to a stop, showing the danger that is a plane landing with only one wheel down. None of the crew make it out of the plane. Derringer talks to Captain Dennis Dearborn about the origin of the name of his plane, as photos are taken and notes are written down.
So you named the plane after your girl back home, is that right? It's a great angle. You don't sound like you're from the South, though, Captain Dearborn.
I met her when I was in Memphis on business.
Yeah, I bet she's a living doll. Hey, Dennis?
She's a very fine woman, sir.
Uh-huh.
He talks to all the officers, getting little pieces of information out of the way in a sleek manner. One important piece is that Valentine Kozlowski, having 4 years of medical school under his belt. Remember that for later. Some of the crew are elated, others are nervous, fearing they will not make it home on this, their 25th mission. Derringer explains the men will be famous when they come back to America and be celebrities. Although Luke Sinclair is excited, Dennis tells them not to talk to the rest of the men about this, as he wants them to keep focus. As we come to the rest of the crew, we find out Virgil has a crazy idea for opening up diners, all looking the same, serving the same food, and being spread all across the US when he gets home. But Danny thinks this is a bad idea, and no one wants to have the same food over and over again in restaurants that look exactly the same. What a crazy notion this is. Bizarre. While they relax, the crew also find out they may possibly be bombing the heart of Germany tomorrow for their last flight, which most of the crew dismiss because they are sure to just get a milk run over France for an easy mission and return, which is kind of how it went. Their last flight to Lorient, France, home of the Kerman submarine base, was not too hectic for them. It was still very dangerous. There was a lot of flak and fighters around the area, and by no means a milk run, but realistically the Belle was Lorient, France for the last run, not Germany. This is one of those little creative licenses just to help make the movie a little bit more movie-like. This leads us to the party of the night, the first anniversary ball of the US Army Air Force.
When tweet tweet, neath the spreading chestnut tree, I said I love you, and there ain't no ifs or buts. He said I love you, and the blacksmith shouted, underneath the spreading chestnut tree, Mary said he...
While Rascal strikes out at his chance getting with Faith, played by Jane Horrocks, Virgil seduces her with talk of his beef burger.
That's my favorite food in the whole world. I mean, you've never had a hamburger? That's unbelievable. You don't know what you're missing.
They sound wonderful. It's been so long since I had any meat.
See, I work the meat very slowly, very, very tenderly. That's the secret. And I rub in a little Worcestershire and a little garlic and a little thyme. And then I ease it into a patty, very gently so I don't bruise the meat.
Virg, you're making me so hungry.
Dennis wanders out to have a chat to his plane, where we see the pin-up in the swimsuit, which is noticeably a vinyl stuck to the plane. Realistically, this is of course will be painted on. This is one of those little nitpicks I have. You just sort of notice these little things, but of course you can't go painting the plane constantly. They actually had to use vinyls because they had to take them on and off of some planes to change their names constantly and change their markings, because they only had a few planes at hand. He also misses out the fact that Virg and Faith are getting to know each other in the nose of the plane, and Virg the Virgin finally loses his cherry in his home away from home, the Memphis Belle. Meanwhile, at the ball, the hardened men of the Belle go and talk to the crew of rookies aboard Mother and Country, who will be getting their first combat mission tomorrow.
Well, we had our first practice today.
How'd it go?
Yeah? Well, we need a couple more. But if you guys have any advice...
Yeah, get a gun, shoot yourself in the foot, go home.
Now that's good advice. Are those size 8s? How about leaving a little will saying when you get your ass shot off on your first mission that those nice shiny new pumps come to me, huh?
Rascal.
The nervous radio operator of the plane throws up from anxiety and meets Danny in the bathroom, where he's given a 4-leaf clover taken from the box of Paddlin' Madeline's pilot, who forgot it on his own flight. Hopefully this will bring him more luck than its former owners when he forgot it. Derringer goes to the stage and calls for a few cheers for the crew of the Belle, and how it will be their last and 25th mission. Of course, this being military gathering, the first hip is a little smaller than he expected, and the crew explain that it's bad luck to cheer 3 times. Derringer, looking a little bewildered, wanders off the stage as Sergeant Clay Busby comes up to sing for his friends, going for Danny Boy to embarrass his sergeant.
No, get back here. You're not getting out of this.
From glen to glen and down the mountainside.
And we end the night with Lieutenant Phil Lafont screaming, There are a few jitters with the men in the morning, and we are treated to the morning briefing.
The target for today is Bremen.
This is our target area right here. They're long rectangular buildings. The only long rectangular buildings in the area, so you can't miss them. The Flugzeugbauer factory is a major assembly plant for 190 fighter planes. Now, you're leading the group today. 360 planes are bombing on your command, so let's be accurate. This is a civilian area here. This is a hospital. These are houses. This is a school and a playground.
After informing his crew, they jump into their jeep and head for the Belle, which is being loaded with 500-pound general-purpose bombs. This is where we see a fair few planes. While some of the ones in the distance are simple mock-ups, 5 of them are actually fully functional B-17s, which really helped this film to look as good as it does rely heavily on practical effects and some great model work. B-17's N3703G and N17W were from America. B-17's FBEA and FAZDX, or the Pink Lady, the only flying B-17 that actually saw combat in Europe that was still airworthy at the time. And GBEDF, aka Sally B of England, who lives at RAF Duxford. Sadly, whilst filming, France's FBEA had an engine failure on takeoff. The pilot tried to get the plane over the trees, however, with the plane pulling to one side and lacking the power to get into the air, the crash was inevitable. The vehicle was lost. All 10 crew did manage to escape, however, 2 suffering some serious injuries, but all with their lives intact. A stark reminder that even with takeoff, these planes were dangerous. During the war, of course, when loaded up with bombs, these planes were very heavy and often did have trouble taking off. Planes were turned around extremely quickly. They would land, be repaired, be put back together again in 24 hours, and then take back to the air. And sometimes little things were missed, and it wasn't too uncommon for a bomber to crash on takeoff. One major issue with all the planes they had, however, was the fact they were all the later G models, which meant they needed to convert the planes to look like the F variants, removing chin turrets and painting them olive drab colours, and often planes had different markings on their right and left side to help with filming multiple planes at once. Interestingly, for the film and the actual recording of the planes in flight, they used a B-25 Mitchell equipped with multiple camera angles, along with a Grumman Avenger with an olive green tail used for some rear shots, making it look like a B-17's tail. Now, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but you will notice a little later on the planes are being escorted by Merlin-engined P-51 Mustangs. A little later on, and well, this is part of the creative freedom, as the Belle was doing her last flights over Germany, the Mustang was still using the Allison engine at the time. The new Rolls-Royce variant was still around half a year off operational use. And speaking of Merlin engines, for the BF-109s, the filming team had a problem. The fact that there were no airworthy BF-109s at the time for use in the film meant they had to opt for a different vehicle. So they went to Spain for the Hispano Aviación 112S plane, which were effectively a BF-109 with a Merlin engine built into it. These were built in the late 1940s and early 1950s, similar to the Fiat G59 plane. The main way this was noticeable is just the air intake underneath the front of the plane and the exhaust ports, but other than that, it's a BF-109 really. Anyway, back to the film. The crew all board their plane and start to check their positions. It is here we get a good look at the interior of the B-17 and start to get ready for the pre-flight checks. But a snafu appears. Situation normal, all fucked up.
Hey, Captain? Yeah, we got a delay. There's a 9/10 cloud cover over the target, but there's a strong chance it'll blow over. Stand by your plane till further notice. For how long? Hey, don't tell me doodly, sir.
Damn it! They always do this.
We learn that the bull turret has been acting up, along with Clay asked by Luke if he can come back and fire the tail gun at some point.
All you gotta do is call up on the intercom and say you have a little trouble in the tail. I come back, you give me the gun for 5 minutes.
It's against regulations, sir.
Oh, come on, screw the regulations.
Sir, if they found out they put my hot dog in a bun and chow down.
Nobody's gonna find out. This is between you and I. Clay, come on, I just wanna get my hands on a gun just once. I mean, how am I gonna get girls back home if I haven't killed a single Nazi? Clay, please, I'll do anything you say. Just name your price. Come here.
Whoa, boy! Anything, sir?
Anything, anything. Give me a dog.
He jokingly says the dog. Fun fact, the crew did actually have a dog, and it was the only female to fly in the Memphis Belle. Her name was Stuka, and she was a small black Scottish terrier. They took her back to America where she became the mascot of the plane. After a short delay, the flare is lit and the B-17s all start their engines and start to taxi off the runway. I would highly recommend a good sound system for this moment alone. The sound of these planes are just fantastic. If you ever get a chance to see a flying warbird, especially a B-17 or a Lancaster, a 4-engined variant preferably, just go for it because the sound is like nothing else. It's well worth the experience. "3 PM and it's time for takeoff. The bell rattles a little bit, her crew gets some jitters, but she glides off the runway with ease and off into the sky. The ground crew all look on, with obvious fear in their hearts, as the bomber formation leave for their mission over Germany. Jack and Eugene compare kills, as we learn Jack has 1 while Gene has 2 confirmed kills to his name. As the plane goes through a heavy cloud bank, Dennis is checking all the systems and flaps are correctly placed. An accident that was actually not too uncommon, unfortunately. As Dennis pours some Chekhov tomato soup, Valentine heads off to arm the bombs. Meanwhile, Rascal climbs into his bull turret, still complaining that it has issues.
Well, there's nothing wrong with the ball turret.
Don't worry your pretty head about it, Burge.
I'm just doing my job, Rascal.
Oh, now you do it? Thanks a lot, buddy.
We see the rather claustrophobic bull turret move into position as they reach the 10,000 feet mark. The crews start their oxygen checks and the formation rallies up. Unfortunately, we don't see the beautiful bright B-17 as a rally leader. Oh well, we can't have it all, I guess. The crew are reminded that they are now at an altitude, bringing the plane down to minus 30 degrees centigrade. In short, don't drool or your oxygen will freeze, and don't touch metal with your bare hands. The crew test their guns and then are joined by their fighter escorts, the aforementioned P-51 Mustangs. Danny gets a radio call from Mother and Country asking if he should fill out his logbook for every single note. Danny does say yes for now, but you'll learn what's needed in future, as he takes a photograph of the rookie crew.
Hey, Smile, I want to take a picture here.
kind of sealing their fate for this movie. The crew joke around a little about what they'll do after the war, and Dennis offers everyone a job at his furniture company, and is joked at for being a little bit too bossy. This is when the first bandits appear.
Bandits, 5 o'clock!
Go get him, little friends!
A flight of 6 109s come in as the Mustangs start to attack, but more 109s appear. The air is filled with traitors. One 109 goes down with the sound of a Jericho trumpet. Oh, Hollywood, would you please stop doing this? Meanwhile, Windy City is hit and catches alight.
Windy City's on fire!
Why don't they do something?
Come on, bail out, you guys!
Come on, wake up! Get up! Hold on!
Phil!
Here! Navigator, checking in.
I say check in, that means right away.
God, somebody's guts are all over the nose!
Rascal remembers a joke from one of the gunners from Windy City.
Anyway, a plane gets shot down. The guy bails out and the Gestapo gets him. His leg is broken, so they have to amputate. He says, do me a favor, after you cut it off, will you give it to one of your pilots and have him drop it over my base in England? And they do it. The next week, they cut off his other leg. He says again, will you have someone drop it over my base in England? And they do it. The next week, they gotta cut off his arm. He asks him one more time, will you please have someone drop it over my base in England? This time they say, 9, this we can't do anymore. And he says, why not? And they say, we think you're trying to escape.
Funny thing about this, I actually heard this joke in about 1991 in school from an ex-RAF crew member. He came to our school to talk about the war and what he did. We actually got lucky in that respect. I had a fair few veterans come to my school, and I was very, very much devoted to history back then as well, and got to meet many veterans from First and Second World War. I'm showing my age now, I guess, but not sure if he stole this joke from the film or if it was just one of those good old jokes from the war, but I like it. I think it's a good joke. We cut back to base with Colonel Harriman. While they wait for the planes to come home, Derringer sets up a homecoming party for the Bell's crew.
I didn't order this.
Leave this stuff to me. The Memphis Belle is my job.
And my job is to approve everything on this base. I did not authorize a homecoming.
Craig, you're working a little hard at being a hard ass.
I have 24 crews up there. They are all special to me.
Well, that's a great story, but baloney's my business. I know it when I see it. All you care about is getting planes in the air. Results. Brown-nosing HQ. The only man in the whole...
Come with me.
Here we hear the words of letters written home.
Dear Sir, your letter of December 10th finally made me realize that my husband is gone. I have been living in the false hopes that the telegram I received was a mistake.
Harriman explains to Derringer that these letters are things he has to do every day when every airman is lost. Sending these letters home is a heartbreak for him. He knows every man on this base, everyone he sends up, and he feels guilt for everyone that doesn't come home. A stark reminder of the horror of war, and this part is often accused of just being a tear-jerking section just for shock value. Many critics cite this about the film, but it is just a fluff piece showing how good things were, and just inserting the letters and footage as a footnote to state that war is bad and people die. To these critics I say, go and watch the film again. You're missing the point, I think. This small section of the film, it reminds us that there were horrors, and people who had to see their friends die. In the Bomber Corps in the early days, there were nearly 80% loss ratios. Pilot Captain Robert K. Morgan, the actual pilot of the Belle, said once, "Imagine going to breakfast with 10 friends, only to come back to dinner with 2 of them, and that was the feeling we all had to suffer." I think this piece is actually a very suitable piece for the film, and it kind of reminds us of the loss over Europe, the losses of these brave young men, these brave young people who fought in the wars, from, you know, one of the common things is everybody just goes to the brave young men, but there were young women also serving as pilots flying planes to bases, as working in bomb factories, working in manufacturing. It was everybody involved in it. You know, children were taken out as bombs rocked their schools. There were so many losses in war. It is a horrific thing. One of the very strange things as a human, as we do tend to generally find combat, and I think remembering the horror of it will hopefully mean that we see less of it in the future. We return to the Belle, where another flight of 109s come in for another attack, and hit the lead plane, Seacup. The nose is hit hard, and the bombardier falls from the now gaping hole in the nose section. Seeing this, the crew are reminded to put their chutes on. Rascal complains there is no room to use a parachute, so he's told to put his safety cord on instead. With Seacup out, the Belle is now on point, 3 minutes out from the bomb run. Another wave hit the plane. As Rascal's ball turret jams, he manages to get it working just in the nick of time to take out the enemy plane, but shortly after the waist gunners are strafed, Jack is hit. Just a graze to his leg, mind you, so he's not too bad, but he does panic a little bit. And this is where the flak starts to appear. The crew start to place on their rather heavy flak jackets and helmets. Body armour was often used on bombers, and it was very heavy and uncomfortable. And if you think about it, you're wearing a parachute, you're wearing body armour, you're wearing a life jacket, you're wearing many layers of leather clothing and padding. It wouldn't be a fun experience up there, and you're going to be up there for near to 8 hours usually. It's a long time to be in the sky, and it would not be a comfortable experience. This is where the bomb run comes in. Val takes over the control of the plane when all of a sudden the cockpit is hit by flak.
Christ, I've never seen it this thick before. Luke's head! Luke's head! No, his ace is got it! It's not me! It's not me! It must be you! It's not me! I think he's in shock! Oh, I'm not in shock! You're in shock! Well, it's definitely not me! Definitely not me! There's gotta be somebody that's flying over the cockpit! Captain, it's tomato soup!
No, it was just Chekhov's tomato soup. If you mention soup in the first act, it's got to come through. An apparent smokescreen now covers their target, making them unable to see their destination for the drop. Also, don't look too close at the Norden bomb site, as the logbook is dated 12th of October 1944. One of those minor little errors that slip into these movies, but that's a pretty funny one, I think. You know, just something simple as that. They have such a close shot of the Norden bomb site and the logbook, and somebody's just gonna go, as they notice that the logbook is a couple of years in advance. So obviously this bomb site has travelled back in time. The target is completely obscured, and Val will not drop unless he is fully happy he is on spot, as the group are following his lead, and when he drops, they drop. Dennis starts to get ready to turn around and come in for a second run. With visibility 0, they decide to turn around. Phil panics and tries to hit the bomb release mechanism, but Val manages to hold him off. The group must turn around to hit the factories.
Everybody listen. I know you want to drop the bombs and get the hell out of here. Now, I don't want to do this any more than you do. We were sent here to bomb a factory. If we don't do it, somebody's going to have to come back here again and do it for us.
Now, in reality, this would never happen. Bomber groups had 3 targets generally. If their first target was covered by clouds or smoke screen, then they'd go to their second target. If the second target happened, then they'd go to the third. Then they would go to basically a free-for-all operation mode where they would look for targets of convenience, so things like airfields, train tracks, submarine pens, naval yards, naval vessels, ships, anything they could find. And if that failed, they would just drop their bombs in the ocean afterwards. This mainly was because when you've released the bombs, got them live, basically taken out the dummy switch to make them active, it's not very easy to turn them off again. And it's much safer to just ditch them than land with a group of live bombs in your plane, you're less likely to go boom if you have a bit of a rough landing. So a little bit of poetic license in this suicidal attempt, because turning around 360 bombers would be suicidal. The flak would just get worse and worse. They would be able to scramble more fighters in that time. It just wouldn't work. But as I said, poetic license, what can you say? A group of bandits appear, and Luke takes his chance to get on the tail gun, swapping it with Clay.
I'm on him. You're over 3 high. Keep your eyes up. Coming like a flower opening. I got him. I got him!
It's the rookies. They got the rookies.
After a few attempts, Luke manages to hit the bandit, but horror of horrors as the German plane crashes into Mother and Country, cleaving the plane in two.
Memphis Belle to Mother and Country, come in. Memphis Belle to Mother and Country, come in!
They swing around once more for the bomb run. Things do not look good, as the target, in Val's words, looks like shit. However, just in time, the air clears and bombs are out.
That's it. That's it. Bombs away.
However, celebrations do not last long, as the ball turret is hit. Rascal is saved only by his safety strap. Jack quickly rushes over to him, opens up the hatch, and pulls him to safety. Danny's distracted by his camera dropping and goes to pick it up, leaving his position for a couple of moments as the plane is strafed. Suddenly, a large explosion happens, hitting Danny hard. Val is called to aid him, but what is this?
Val?
What are you doing? It's Danny.
I can't. There's fighters.
I'll cover your gun. Just go.
Maybe somebody in the back of the plane can take care of it.
Hey, you're the doctor.
Just it. I'm not. Phil, I lied.
He lied. He only had 2 weeks of medical school, and Danny has serious abdominal wounds. He can't help this. He can't fix this. This is too much for him. There's no time to stop and think, though, as they're strafed once more by a 109. They lose a large chunk of their tail, which is actually a true story from the Belle herself, and one of their right engines is hit. It catches on fire. Captain Dennis puts it into a steep dive to try and put the fire out, but they are nearing their maximum dive speed. The plane starts to shudder, the wings start to tear, things look bad, but at 10,000 feet they pull out of the dive, the fire out. The engine, however, destroyed. Diving actually wasn't the method used for putting an engine fire out, and is actually not the right method for putting a fire out. Generally, the first thing you'd do is you'd obviously cut the fuel lines, but if the fire continued, you would sort of tilt the plane up and actually sort of put it into a stall almost, stalling the wing, and almost cutting off its airflow and starving it. When you go into a dive, you actually increase the airflow and increase the oxygen on it, and the fire can spread quicker. So you were better off sort of going into a slightly steep dive and almost sort of tilting the plane over and putting the fire out that way. And that was the preferred method for putting fires out on plane engines, or generally just trusting in the extinguishers actually in the engines themselves. Val starts to panic as Danny is in a critical condition. He suggests parachuting him out in the hopes that he'll land in Germany, where he will be taken to a medical camp and treated at least for his injuries. The plan is to pull the ripcord on his parachute as they place him out through the bomb bay doors. Phil, however, is not convinced this is the best option, and he believes that Val can actually save his life. Val can do this, and dropping him out would not save Danny, but leave him to die. We cut back to the airfield as the crew play baseball. Flares are lit, the men start to take their positions, and the count starts. 10 planes are spotted, but none of them are the Belle. The crew nearing Britain need to lighten the plane, as they are down to just 2 engines. They start to throw out all the guns and any extra weight they can. We find Danny is still on board, Val giving him the best treatment he can, as they see the beaches of England finally. Danny wakes up, but shortly loses consciousness after a couple of moments talking. This leads to Val having to perform CPR, just managing to bring him back from the brink of death. Funny enough, actually, the method of CPR used, the sort of closed compressions on the chest, was not actually a thing until around about the 1950s, 1960s. So with his 2 weeks of medical training, Val had actually discovered a new way of CPR, which, you know, good for him. As they go for a landing, the electrics start to fail. Only one wheel manages to go down and lock into position. The crew, having seen how badly this went before the prior day for the last B-17 to land on one wheel, start to panic and go to try and manually lower the wheel. The issues don't stop here, however, as another engine goes out. Now the plane is stricken with only one engine to keep her aloft. The ground crew, seemingly giving up hope, start to clean up. That is until they hear the engine whine over the horizon and spot the stricken plane with only one wheel down. Coming into land, the crew of the Belle work hard, lowering the landing gear by hand using the crank, which is not in the best position as it's over the bomb bay doors, which swing open as they're going into land, as one of the crew members discovers as he nearly falls out of the plane. Not the best way to land, all in all. Now, one other thing you'll actually notice as the plane lands is the bomb bay door is not in fact open, and the plane has miraculously recovered its ball turret. One of those little minor issues that I said is in the film. You know, you notice these little things here and there. Unfortunately, it's pretty hard when you're actually filming with real planes to do these kind of practical effects. As they come in for the landing, the gear is finally locked into position mere moments before touchdown, and everything works out. It's not the smoothest of landings, but they are home. The men and women of the base cheer and run for the plane, along with, of course, the good boy, their doggo. Battered, bruised and beaten, the crew celebrate. And the film ends, dedicating itself to all the brave young men, whatever their nationality, who ever flew and fought in history's greatest airborne confrontation. And thus we end the Memphis Belle. This is not historically accurate to the point that it's not actually an account of the plane's last flight, nor her crew. The truth is, actually, many of the Belle's crew had not yet reached their 25 missions, and so they needed to fly a couple of extra flights in other planes before they could finish their operational tour and head home for the War Bond tour and to nice celebrity lifestyle. The Memphis Belle was not even the first bomber to hit 25. That goes to the B-24 Hot Stuff. The plane had completed nearly 30 combat missions and was coming back to America in May of 1943, the same time period as the Memphis Belle sort of started her missions. However, the plane hit bad weather over Iceland and crashed into a mountain, killing 14 of the crew on board. Miraculously, however, the tail section survived, along with the tail gunner. The next plane to reach 25 combat missions was Hell's Angels, who completed 25 missions 1 week prior to the Belle. However, the name was not great for publicity, in the fact that it was named Hell's Angels. The plane carried on in Europe and ended 48 missions with no abortions or crew lost. Sadly, the plane returned to America and ended up being scrapped, a fate that was going to happen to the Memphis Belle herself. But a reporter saw her and managed to save her from being scrapped. Overall, I love this movie. Despite its factual inaccuracies, normally I'm a bit of a history nerd and want every part of the film to be as accurate as possible, but if I can't get that, then a film based off many stories is just fine, as long as you pay respect to the material and time period. There are no superhuman feats in this movie. The B-17s were known to be very survivable. Almost anything could be hit on them and they would pretty much take a beating and return home still, often missing most of the plane. The respect paid to the air crews and the people at the time on this movie is obvious. You can see they've done a lot of research. The fact they're using real planes, they're using real B-17s for this, they're using a B-25 for filming it. There is so much love put into this movie to try and make it look as good and accurate as possible. It notices. You can see some obvious green screens here and there, but it doesn't matter. The film still has that sort of tactile sense that they are real planes, and it works very well, even on a large screen in modern times. The film sadly was not a financial success. Costing 23 million, it only made 27 million back. Likely lost a little bit of money there, because when you account for a film's budget, you sort of have to add an extra sort of 10 million for things like advertisements and things like that. So generally, if it's that sort of only a small margin, we're still talking millions of dollars here, but generally they consider that a loss. And well, the biggest thing, it also lost a B-17. It lost a flying B-17. Luckily all those crew members were fine, but that's one of the hardest parts for me. Just losing that plane, losing that part of history is never a good thing. I would never say the film failed though, and it is an under-acknowledged and underrated classic with many practical effects. It had a decent studio section and use of green screen. The film still looks great, as I said, and it has a fantastic story to tell. Personally, this film fueled my love of heavy bombers as a child and got me interested in the history of the Second World War, and also made me spend a lot of my pocket money on airfix kits and building a few B-17s and B-29s in my bedroom. All in all, I would give this film 4 lost body parts parachuted back to its homeland out of 5. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, do let me know below, because I would like to make more of these if you have enjoyed it. I do enjoy the odd movie review, picking apart a few things. Sometimes, as with a previous one about a U-boat, where I absolutely ripped it to shreds because I hate that movie with a passion. This one I adore, and there are so many good war movies out there. I'd love to do some more reviews on them if that's what people want to see. So if you do, give me a like, subscribe, things like that. Let me know if you want to see more content. Let me know what other movies you'd like to see me review, if you'd like to see me review them. And if you like history, then please subscribe to the channel, because I do focus on that part. There is a lot of gaming on here, but history is my general passion, and I do try and make as many bits about history as I can. So, thank you so much for watching. This is me, Carl, Screezilla, out. Bye-bye. Hi all, just want to say sorry about the green filter and just the chops. This has been a nightmare to get out. Warner Brothers have been attacking this video so much, despite the amount of content that is on YouTube already. Real pain in the arse to get out, but hopefully this one works and we get to actually see this review in full. Have a good day.